Do you want to check out ITProTV but aren't ready to commit? We're making a few episodes from our most popular courses free for you to try here on YouTube so you can see what they're all about. Enjoy this episode and head over to ITPro.tv when you're ready to see the full course.
If you've ever wondered what scalability, elasticity, and agility mean and how they relate to the Azure platform, well, stay tuned. We're going to take a look.
You're watching ITProTV.
Hello, welcome to your Azure Fundamentals series. I'm your host, Cherokee Boos, and today we have Mr. Mike Roderick in studios. He's going to be talking about concepts such as scalability, elasticity, and agility. So these seem like a pretty common denominator, not just from the Azure platform, but across multiple cloud providers. So what are we going to be talking about here today, Mike?
Well, what you just mentioned, we want to take a look at those terms again as just in general, right? As we get ready to move through this Azure Fundamentals, it's important that we're all on the same page as far as terminology goes. And we've just talked about high availability and how that's one of the benefits of moving to the cloud and the different ways cloud solutions provide that high availability. We also want to understand what scalability is, what elasticity is, what agility is. How does moving to the cloud, because at this point are we thinking about moving to the cloud? We want to take our on-premises environment and move it out there, or maybe we don't even have an environment yet. We're just starting out. We're thinking about doing it completely in the cloud. What are these terms? What do they mean to me when that cloud service provider says that we can provide you with scalability? Is that something I'm concerned with? Do I want that or do I not want that, right? That's what we want to look at here. So let's first start out, when it comes to clouds and cloud service providers, it's not free. We have to pay for it. And we typically pay by resource utilization, right? So in other words, if I spin up, let's say I want to provide a web application, I'm going to need certain resources behind it, most likely a web front end, maybe a database back end, some kind of gateway, maybe some load balancers if I need to do more than one web server. There's going to be a lot of different components associated with that. And each one of those components is going to cost me money. So depending on my needs, let's say, we're a small shop. We're not Amazon. We don't have hundreds of thousands of customers hitting our site every hour. Maybe one or two or three front-end servers is plenty for me, right? I don't want to spin up 20 if I'm not going to use them because I got to pay for 20, right? So we spin up what we need, what we have to look at what we expect our needs to be resource-wise, and then we purchase and build accordingly. Because again, it's all based on that usage. The more VMs I spin up, the more my monthly bill is going to be. The more hard drives I end up creating and storage I consume, the more my bill is going to be. So we want to keep that, or control our costs by controlling any, not creating unnecessary or unused resources. But our needs change, and they can change really fast in today's environments, right? You run a sale, and all of a sudden those three front-end servers that handled your workload normally are choking because you've got an extra number of visitors to your website because of this great sale that you've got going on, or what was the old term? You got slash dotted.
I don't know that one.
You'd get some free advertisement. Someone would mention your site.
Yeah, like if your company's name popped up in a news article and it went viral or something like that. Yeah, and you weren't expecting that influx.
Yeah, right. You weren't expecting that. You're not set up to handle that, but you want to handle that. You want all those people that have just heard about your company to come to your site and go, wow, this place is horrible. I can't even connect to their website.
Right?
That's not a good thing. So I need to be able to react to changes like that. And then when the sale's over, I don't need all those machines anymore, and I would love to be able to take that back. And that's something that the cloud is going to provide for us. It's something that is much more difficult in the physical or the on-premises world, all right? So those are the concepts we're going to take a look at, and we'll start with the term scalability first, right?
Okay.
And scalability, when we talk about scaling, we're just talking about changing the resources to handle a particular workload. So the process of adding resources. Now, we can scale vertically, and we can also scale horizontally. And it's important that we understand the difference between those two. So join me on my screen here. Got a little kind of an animation to hopefully make this a little more clear. When we talk about scaling vertically, we're talking about, vertical being up, resizing a particular, in this case, a VM, for example. So if we scale, we can add resources. Let's say that the VM that I built had 4 processors and 8 gigs of RAM.
Okay.
If I want to scale up, I might decide that, that 8 gigs of RAM is not enough. We're going to double that. We're going to give it 16 gigs of RAM, or go even further and go 32 gigs of RAM. Or maybe it's the processing power that's choking that VM. So we can increase the number of cores that virtual machine has. So scaling up is adding resources to that virtual machine, making that virtual machine more powerful, all right? But then the converse is also true. At some point, we might decide that, we don't need 32 gigs of RAM. We've overshot that. We've misinterpreted the information, and we've added too much, or we were just like clicking like crazy, and now we realize, 16 would have been fine. We can scale down, which would mean to remove resources out of that VM. So this is scaling vertically. Think about getting bigger or getting smaller vertically. We also have scaling horizontally. So horizontally, we're talking about, I don't know another way to say horizontally, but horizontally, we're scaling out, all right? So instead of up or down, now we're scaling out, and we're going to add additional VMs. So here you can see 1 VM wasn't enough, so let's add 2, let's add 4, let's add 6, right? You're going to add additional VMs. This is scaling horizontally. So we're taking that 1 VM. We're not changing, the VM still has, let's say it has 4 processors and 8 gigs of RAM. Rather than add processor and RAM to that single VM, we're just going to duplicate that VM and make another one with 4 processors and 8 gigs, and then another one with 4 processors and 8 gigs. So this would be scaling out, right? And then we have scaling back in, of course, would be the converse of that, where we reduce the overall number of virtual machines. And each one of these solutions has a place, right? You have to decide what is the bottleneck and which one of these is going to provide you with the solution you're looking for, right? If the problem is a web server can't handle the number of current connections that are connecting to it, well then adding a second or a third front-end web server would increase the number of possible connections, right? And would allow you to handle that spike in traffic. But if the problem was the web server was performing some calculation and it didn't have enough memory to load up the data set required to perform that calculation, it was doing swapping and things like that, adding another VM just means that one's going to be the exact same, and it's going to choke on the same calculation. So scaling out in that case wouldn't help you. That's when you're going to need to scale up and increase the number of resources in that particular VM. So both solutions are scaling, right? That's all part of scalability, but whether you scale up or out, and then the converse would be back in or down, is going to be determined by what is causing the problem in the first place.
And then you put your left foot in and your left foot out.
Right, I know. It is
Hokey-pokey.
a little crazy, right, when it comes to this terminology. So hopefully that makes sense with you as far as scaling goes. And it is a benefit of moving to the cloud. Like I can scale on premises. Right? We can go in and I can go to my Hyper-V server and I can spin up additional VMs, or I can build a new VM or shut a VM down and add resources to it. But by moving to the cloud, we get something known as elasticity, and we get something known as agility, right? Elasticity is the ability to automate this whole process. Rather than me having to wait until I get errors or phone calls, hey, the website is slow, I've got customers complaining, what have you, and then going in and adding additional resources, elasticity means I can automate this whole process, right? With our cloud service providers, they can help monitor my solution, and if we set a metric to where, hey, if it gets to this point, spin up another VM. Or if it gets to this point, let's upsize that VM. We can automate this process, and that is known as the elasticity that we get from going to the cloud.
And going back to that concept that you were talking about, like when we're talking about, maybe CPU utilization or just not being able to handle the bandwidth for a web application, this is really cool concept because with that elasticity, I could create a scale set and then set a trigger. Like once virtual machine 1 reaches 80% utilization, go ahead and spin up virtual machine 2 to offset some of that workload so I can still have that performance or stability that my end users expect. And Microsoft has taken this idea and really just ran with it because now we even have concepts like serverless functions, right? Or serverless computing where we're billed as something, I want to say it's the milliseconds per billing. So I can set a trigger that when some particular a GET request for an HTTP GET request comes in, I can run a trigger, a container, not even a full-blown virtual machine, just a container is spun up, that function is executed, then torn back down in the matter of seconds. So we see that, how they're just taking this idea of elasticity and running with it. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really helps you control your costs because, as we said a minute ago, you could do this on premises, right? But that would mean placing an order with your provider, right? Getting in new hardware, putting it into the rack, setting all that up, configuring everything, okay, now I've got additional web servers that can handle that workload. But then what happens when the need is not there anymore, right? It was a spike in traffic that occurred because of holiday season. Holidays are over. You ship everything back? Are they going to give you your money back for the device? It's not going to work that way. With cloud, we get this elasticity where I can, stretch out when I need to, but then immediately, as soon as that demand is over, as Cherokee's saying, within seconds, we can drop back down. Because remember, you're typically paying for resource utilization, so I want to make sure that as soon as that spike's over and I don't need those resources, I can have that drop back down. Right, and that elasticity, that automation of that is fantastic. I don't have to remember. I don't have to monitor myself and then remember to go shut down those extra VMs that got spun up. It can do it for me, and it can do it within seconds, and that's going to help me control that cost. Right, and then the last term we mentioned was the agility. And that's really what I was just talking about is how fast this can occur. And that's what Cherokee was alluding to, was that it's not weeks or months like it would be in on-premises, procuring, going through, creating a budget, getting that approved, going through and procuring the equipment, putting that in the rack, setting it all up. It's minutes, it's hours, minutes, maybe even seconds that we can spin up additional front-end servers, right? It's within seconds that I can add additional RAM to that machine that needs it. And then converse is true as well, bringing it back down as soon as we don't need it anymore. So that agility is the ability to do this quickly and really help me control my costs. So again, more benefits of moving out to the cloud. We're going to get that scalability, the ability to scale as we need it, both scaling up and out as well as down and in. We're going to get our elasticity, the ability to automate all of this scaling, and the agility, the ability to do this extremely fast. And that gives you those some terms we're going to need as we move forward in our AZ-900.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, Mike, because yes, those terms are going to be popping up in a lot of our conversations. So we want to make sure you are on the same page and are successful throughout the duration of this course. But I think for now, that's about it. So we'll go ahead and sign out. I've been your host, Cherokee Boos.
And I'm Mike Roderick.
See you next time.
Thank you for watching ITProTV.